Hi, and welcome back to another daily dose of anime recaps. In this episode, we'll be covering the manga I Shall Live as a Prince. When an ordinary Korean guy struggling through life is reborn as a great prince in the Joseon dynasty, it sounds like a pretty good bargain, right? Well, if you're the younger brother of King Yongsan, one of Joseon's most oppressive rulers, then no. A reign of terror is on the horizon, and it's only a matter of days until everything goes wrong. However, history may not repeat itself with Grand Prince Jinsong. Right off the bat, we're introduced to a guy who's on the verge of dying and is cussing at himself for not paying enough attention during middle school history lessons. Apparently, whether he will live or die in the next couple of minutes will be decided by whatever happened in the past. So yeah, this is a reincarnation thing. The only problem is that this guy hasn't been resurrected as any average Joe, but rather the Prince of Joseon, Jinsong. This means that everything this guy knew about history has been twisted, and he'll have to experience it firsthand. So who is he? Considering that he got reincarnated as a prince, he must have been quite a big deal in his previous life, right? Wrong. He was a total loser. Previously, he went by the name Hyunho Lee, and every aspect of his life was ordinary. Like that, it was just another ordinary day in his life, getting rejected in job interviews and all that. He came back home, scratched off another job from his list, and plopped down on his bed while thinking about how he has to continue his miserable life in Korea, and can only dream about having a house, a wife, and children. But hey, be careful what you wish for, right? He wakes up the next day, and poof, everything he knew was gone. He finds himself lying on a rock-hard pillow wearing an ancient Korean hanbok and a gat in a room that looks nothing like the apartment he was living in. Hyunho panics and rushes to open the nearby window and realizes he's in the middle of the mountains. To him, this can only mean one thing. It's just a dream. He finally calms down and goes back to the mattress to peacefully sleep. 3 months go by, just like that. He wakes up, opens the window, and tells himself it was just a dream. Then he realizes that denial is not a river in Egypt, and he should admit the fact that his life has turned upside down. However, he soon realizes that everything has changed for good. Since he's a prince now, all of his worries have evaporated into thin air. Job, house, rent. He now has so many dishes on the table, he can't pick which one to eat first. In fact, he doesn't even have to put on his own shoes. He lifts a finger, and someone comes running to help him. After humoring himself to the extent that he gets bored with the rich life, he finally starts asking important questions. For example, what day is it? He summons his personal servant, Doksun, to ask him about the details and is told that it is the year of the black pig. After realizing that whatever Doksun is saying is going over his head, Hyunho now tries to push-start his fried brain cells after 4 months. While recalling whatever pieces of history book pages are floating around in his memory, he realizes that his older brother, Young Sangun, is the king, but not just any typical king. Remembering his name sends shivers down Jinsong's spine. Apparently, Yeon Sangun was known to be the most tyrannical king who mercilessly killed many innocent people and was overthrown in the end. Jinsong gets interrupted in the middle of his existential crisis by a guest who goes by the name Sunjae Lim. Now, Jinsong knows that Sunjae plays a treacherous role in this storyline, so he's cautious. Folks, this is why you should pay attention to your history teacher. You never know when you could be reincarnated as a prince with a murderous brother and traitors everywhere. Sunjae Lim informs Jinsong that His Majesty Yen Sagun is waiting for him. The words freeze Jinsong in his place. He knows he's on his way to the slaughterhouse. Surprisingly, Yeon Sangun greets him with open arms and is very cheerful. He offers him a drink and starts joking around. Jinsong is unable to believe what he's seeing. Does his so-called ruthless brother have 2 personalities? Or was the history that he thought he knew just a lie? Jinsong, his brother, and the suspicious consort, Sunjae, go out on a hunting trip together. We get a modernized version of the trip where all 3 of them are in an internet cafe when Yeon Sangun is having a blast with his awesome kill-death ratio. He has had 11 kills, and Sunjae keeps hyping him up. Although Jinsong has become a prince, he is still the loser from his previous life, which means that he's a noob in hunting. Finally, cut to the real ancient version of hunting. Sunjae loads the deer that Yeon Sangun just hunted to be carried to their village. While the latter and Jinsong are conversing, a wild boar attacks. It's as if the beast can smell the fear because it keeps assaulting Jin Sung, and his horse runs away. Using his archery skills, Yin Sung-gun takes down the boar, and Sung Jae deals the final blow by shoving his sword inside it. Both of them become drenched in blood, and Jin Sung gets his first glimpse into the real side of his new life. To his surprise, Yoon Sang-gun quickly rushes to hug him and looks genuinely worried. Jin Sung can't stop pondering whether this softie is really the ruthless king painted in history books. However, the story starts making some sense when Yoon Sang-gun mercilessly slashes the throat of the horse that ran away and left Jin Sung behind. But his maniacal behavior is only in love for his little brother. He even goes as far as to give his little brother his own horse, which is a rare breed that has survived numerous battles in the past. It looks like Jin Sung means the world to his brother. The latter's contradicting behavior causes him to conclude that maybe history cannot always be trusted. The boar is sacrificed and gifted to Jin Sung. Seeing that his servants' mouths are overflowing with saliva, he gives it to them. That's when he's informed that the inner room's master has returned from her mother's house. Yep, you got it right. This 15-year-old pulled a wife, and they've been married for 3 years. The guy who couldn't even date in his previous life. Man, reincarnations are fun. Anyway, Jin Sung is busy wondering what if the woman is not her type, which quite specifically are a career-oriented woman with cold stares. However, he quickly throws the description of this type down the drain when he meets her. Yul Shin's radiating beauty almost blinds him. This is followed by a detailed description of how she fits every beauty criteria of the Joseon dynasty. While Jin Sung is busy drooling over her, nighttime arrives and he realizes that they have to sleep together, which sounds pretty illegal even to him. Meanwhile, someplace else, Yin Sung-gun is thinking about how quickly his brother has had a change of personality. Sung Jae adds fuel to the fire by telling the king to not take today's boar incident lightly. Yin Sung-gun snaps and grabs the girl who had just been dancing in front of him. He whispers to her how much he loves killing and she starts begging for her life. While he's busy deciding whether he should kill her or not, Sung Jae makes an innuendo that causes the maniac to laugh out loud. This shows how much control this consort has over the king. Jin Sung couldn't sleep the entire night and was just laying still like a dead body because of anxiety. In the morning, his wife mentions that something feels so new about him. This causes Jin Sung to panic. He's afraid that if he gets caught, he'll be sent back to his world as punishment. He also notices that ancient times had unnecessary rules and manners. Jin Sung decides that as long as he's here, he's planning to change things. For example, he has already told his wife to call him darling instead of master. His wife, Yul, reveals that the queen has called for her and they decide to pay the visit together. While Jin Sung is on his horse thinking about how everyone must hate him for stealing such an ideal wife, he suddenly remembers a history drama in which Yul is the daughter of Yoon Sang-gun's entourage. Apparently, in the past, Jin Sung overthrows his tyrannical brother and becomes the king. However, for some reason, Yul's father does not support the coup and thus gets killed, and Yul is exiled 7 days after becoming queen. In the end, she dies a lonely death. Jin Sung doesn't care about becoming a king or not. He just wants a life as a prince with his flawless wife. To save her, Jin Sung must stop the coup from happening. And to do that, he needs to stop corruption and cruelty from entering his brother's heart. Suddenly, he realizes the reason he has been sent to the past, to change history, literally. And for that, he just needs to become a personal therapist of his twisted brother. The couple visits the extravagant palace and visits the queen, who happens to be Yul's aunt. Meanwhile, at the king's place, Yoon Sang-gun is getting lectured by the general inspector for always amusing himself with hunting and not taking public affairs seriously. Although Yoon Sang-gun is pissed off and agrees to change his behaviors in the future, as soon as the inspector leaves, this psychopath kicks in and he starts breaking dishes. However, his mood brightens up when he hears that his little brother has arrived. While Jin Sung is admiring the lavish nature of the king's quarters, Yoon Sang-gun asks him the reason for his visit. He reveals that he's concerned about the latter's mental health, so he asks him the method he uses to take a chill pill, since governing a whole dynasty can be quite stressful. This was probably the first time someone actually cared about his well-being, so Yoon Sang-gun is a little taken aback. He admits that the only escape he's ever known is hunting, which Jin Sung absolutely despises, especially given the last incident. When Jin Sung mentions that he hasn't even used the horse Yun Sang-gun gifted him, the latter gets offended and immediately takes him out for a horse ride and teaches him how to ride like a pro. This is followed by a couple of flashbacks that Yun Sang-gun gets back when he learned horse riding as a kid from his father. He was told that matching the movements of a horse is just like governing a country and being in sync with the court. This advice is why Yun Sang-gun appears to always agree with whatever the inspector blabbers. Yun Sang-gun notices that he sees his past self in his little brother. They both go out to eat meat, and Jin Sung makes a dad joke about always meeting the standards. Apparently, Yun Sang-gun enjoys his little brother's dead humor. In fact, he simply adores Jin Sung's company. Unfortunately, their wholesome moments are cut short when the inspector arrives on the scene again with his men. He blames Yun Sang-gun for the poor economic condition of the state, where the people are barely surviving while he's busy entertaining himself with his brother. Uh-oh, looks like this inspector is breathing the last few of his breaths. Surprisingly, Yun Sang-gun admits that it is his fault and agrees to leave with the inspector. However, drunk Jin Sung owes nothing to the inspector and isn't afraid of correcting him that the bad economy isn't the fault of one person, but the entire council, including him. Jin Sung's approach makes sense because maybe it was the cruelty of the council that drove Yun Sang-gun insane in history. However, before the council could take any actions against his brother, Yun Sang-gun admits his mistake and tells the council to leave. When he's at his quarters again, Yun Sang-gun repeats Jin Sung's phrase, meeting the standards, with bloodshot eyes. Let's not jump to conclusions just yet, because maybe he's trying to attempt dad jokes with a face that looks like he's about to commit genocide. Meanwhile, the scholars of the council laugh together over how they're slowly driving the king mad. And whatever evil they do doesn't matter because history is in their hands, since they're the ones who record it. Although they're slightly pissed off about Jin Sung's behavior, they're determined to muffle his voice as well. Meanwhile, at home, after the queen's advice, Yul is finally ready to have some mini Jin Sung, so she prepares him several drinks. However, to her disappointment, the only person even drunk Jin Sung wants to talk about is the king. He asks her if there was something that might have disturbed Yun Sang-gun. The story she narrates reveals that apparently Yun Sang-gun's mother, the queen, was jealous of the king's numerous relationships with the concubines, and one day, while having a heated argument, she scarred his face. Enraged, Yun Sang-gun's grandmother exiled her, and later his mother was executed by the king. This has been kept a secret from Yun Sang-gun, and Jin Sung plans to let it stay that way to prevent him from going on a killing spree. Unfortunately, it seems that Yun Sang-gun already knows the secret and hates himself for not being able to protect his mother. He tells his concubine, Jang Nok-su, that he can't wait to kill everyone, including their wives and children. It seems that it might just be too late for Jin Sung to save him. The courtiers want Jin Sung to be punished because he's still young and makes many mistakes. Yun Sang-gun argues that his brother did nothing wrong and was just protecting his pride. He refuses to go with the court's order. Eventually, after seeing Yun Sang-gun's erupting rage, the courtiers disappear. Jin Sung hears of the trial and realizes that courtiers are clever bastards that need to be dealt with the same way. He visits Yun Sang-gun to request a good teacher who would help him study so that he can become a man who can protect his brother in front of the shitty court. However, once Jin Sung leaves, Sung Jae asks Yun Sang-gun if it is the right thing to do, and the latter replies that Jin Sung knew what he was getting into, so it will be all right. The court members are holding a meeting to discuss that the king is finally showing his true colors. A particular face is not shown, but this person seems to be really concerned about Jin Sung and his demand for a new teacher. The court decides to appoint a man known as Jang Gon-li, who once held an unofficial trial against the king for neglecting his duties. Now, he'll act as a spy on behalf of the court. When Jang Gon-li is informed about this decision, he panics. Apparently, from this day onward, Jin Sung will be his responsibility. If the Grand Prince does anything questionable, Jang Gon-li will be held accountable. He visits the palace to meet Jin Sung and remarks that the latter looks quite energetic, although he lacks elegance. When asked how many books are in Jin Sung's knowledge, he shamelessly replies, none. Jang Gon-li takes a deep breath, excuses himself for a minute, and goes outside to cuss at the court for throwing him into this hell. Meanwhile, later that night, Yun Sang-gun secretly visits Sung Jae's father and asks him if the list he had demanded had been prepared. The old man immediately presents the work, and Yun Sang-gun looks satisfied. It's revealed that the Joseon dynasty was found 100 years ago, and many princes died for the power and the crown. Soon, some of the princes started acting like lunatics to prove that they were not worthy of kingship so that they might survive. Jangun Li assumes that Jin Sung is also trying his best to pretend to be dumb for the same reason, because there's no way someone who doesn't know how to write basic alphabets. Days pass, and Jin Sung spends a day and night with his eyes glued to the books. One day the teacher is late, so Yul dictates him some words, and he's surprised to see that he got all of them correct. Even Jin Sung admits that he feels like his brain has suddenly been hardwired into a high-end computer. He shows his wife that the boredom has caused him to invent a game, and he's actually excited to see her reaction. The game is Jenga, where you have to stack the wooden planks and keep them steady. It's funny that Jin Sung takes credit for inventing it. The punishment for the loser is that the winner gets to draw on the other's face. Soon, Jangun Li arrives and panics when he hears screams coming from the Grand Prince's room. When he pushes the door open, he seems rather disappointed to see both of their faces covered in funny drawings. That day, Jangun Li concludes that the Grand Prince isn't pretending to be dumb, but is in fact dumb to the core. Looks like Jin Sung is planning to gift the toy to Yin Sung-gun as well. Maybe what his life has been lacking are fun games. Meanwhile, Yul is stressed over memorizing textbooks that she has to read out loud to Queen In-su, the same queen who got Yin Sung-gun's mother executed. Not to mention the textbooks are pretty sexist. Although Jin Sung doesn't approve of the books after taking a look at them, he gives a peck on his wife's forehead to wish her good luck. When Jin Sung reaches the king's quarters, he notices that his concubine Nok-su is also there. He presents his gift, and a few minutes later everyone seems to be enjoying the game to its fullest. When Yung Sung-gun loses his temper over constantly losing, Nok-su starts flirting with him, and Jin Sung notices that she's pretty good at calming him down. Meanwhile, Yul succeeds at impressing the Grand Queen In-su with the text she memorized and gives credit to her husband's kiss. On the other hand, her husband even managed to drag in Sun-jae. Yul spends the entire night waiting for her husband, who comes home drunk. She's jealous, but instantly changes her emotions because jealousy is one of the 7 sins that can get a woman to be exiled. When Jin Sung notices it, he quickly apologizes and promises to never leave her, even if it means changing history, which is followed by a wholesome kiss. Jangun Li is taken aback when he sees that Jin Sung has mastered so many books in such a short time. Catching Jangun Li off guard, Jin Sung asks him about his teacher. Jangun reveals that his teacher was exiled by the previous king after a purging. This reminds Jin Sung of his aim to prevent the next purging so that this revolution doesn't take place and his father-in-law won't be executed and his wife won't be exiled. He takes the prince outside to start the next step in his learning process. While they're out on the field in extremely hot weather, Jangun asks Jin Sung if studying adds to a person's value. The prince responds that a person's value is not determined by such factors, since there are many knowledgeable people on the court who have rotten personalities. They encounter a group of farmers who are working hard under scorching heat, so Jin Sung decides to gift them one of the 15 watermelons that were gifted to him by the king. He then asks his servant Doksun to take 5 more watermelons and distribute them among the servants. Jangun is absolutely shocked and confused to see this, because it makes Jin Sung's personality even harder for him to understand. Jin Sung has been craving KFC so badly that he's seeing fried chicken floating in the air. He's had enough of seafood and heads towards the kitchen. His servants warn him of the saying that if a man enters the kitchen, his wiener falls off, but he's ready to risk it all or he will go insane. Apparently, in his previous life, he used to work at a chicken restaurant and knows what exact ingredients are needed. At the end of the day, fried chicken is prepared and everyone loses their mind. They had never thought that something could be crusty on the outside and tender on the inside. So basically, Jin Sung is gradually introducing a touch of modern-day Korea into Joseon dynasty. The next saga is about Jin Sung trying to keep his servant Doksun to get laid. Never mind that he himself has 0 experience. The girl that Doksun is interested in is Jogum, who washes laundry daily. A light bulb lights up in Jin Sung's conscience. Time to invent soap. He orders oil to be melted and mixed with charcoal water, and this results in a smooth, shiny soap. Doksun arrives at the laundry place looking a Chad while holding an item no eye has ever seen. He unwraps the soap, turns it into a yassified version of his previous self, and tells Jogum to not get her hands roughed up until he's ready to hold them. Ancient ways of flirting are hilarious. Jin Sung couldn't be more proud of his homie's riz. Meanwhile, poor Yung Sang-gun is surrounded by annoying courtiers who are lecturing him for not being a good enough king. Although he has given up hunting on their orders, they are still not satisfied. The inspector, especially, did not like the fact that Yung Sang-gun gifted Jin Sung 15 expensive watermelons. However, his speech is cut short when Jin Sung enters the palace, and Yung Sang-gun casually calls off the meeting. Apparently, Jin Sung is here to gift his brother fried chicken and soap in return for providing him with an excellent teacher. Yung Sang-gun mentions that Zhang Gun-li is an excellent archer and poet. This reminds Jung Sung of a poem that he had been jotting. After sitting by a riverside, Jin Sung had come up with an excellent poem titled Laundry, which explains the fate of a piece of cloth that was dirty, but after getting mercilessly beaten up with charcoal and water has now become cleaner. It looks like Yung Sang-gun has a rock for a brain in his skull, because during the entire poem he could only imagine himself torturing the courtiers until they repent for their sins and become cleaner. He loves the poem so much that he commands this to be read by every official. Later that night, he secretly visits the same geezer and shows him the poem. The old man assumes that Jin Sung knows what Yung Sang-gun's intentions are, and therefore he purposely uses implicit wordings in his poem. The queen calls Yul to a temple, and Jin Sung, being an annoying brat that he is, tags along. Out of courtesy, he asks Yul why the queen and king are rarely together. Yul reveals that ever since 6 of their children died in 1 year, they stopped seeing each other because it reminded them of the pain. Also, Yul's probably wondering if her husband has amnesia or something, because how could he forget these important details? They reach the temple, but the queen is busy praying. Jin Sung remembers that, in history, the remainder of his brother's children were executed by poison after the coup. More of a reason why he must stop it from happening. As soon as the queen finishes, a servant comes running to tell her that one of the kids has caught smallpox, which was a fatal disease back then. The queen passes out, and Jin Sung leaves to check up on the king, and finds him doing a traditional sword dance to ward off harmful spirits that might be trying to hurt his children. Jin Sung wanted to be this guy's therapist, but how do you fix someone so broken? It seems that Yung Sang-gun's insanity is starting to make sense. Jin Sung gets too close to the dancing Yung Sang-gun, and his face gets slashed by the sword. But this isn't enough to stop him. He quickly hugs him and tells him everything will be all right. This causes the tough king to tear up, and he reveals that the worst part of the entire situation is that he's helpless. He enters the court after that and is enraged when the courtiers keep blaming him for letting his little son stay over at the house of the enemy against their suggestion. Gradually, Yung Sang-gun's desire to smash each of these courtiers' heads into a pillar starts making more sense. They don't even want to talk about smallpox. All they are concerned about is why Jin Sung hugged Yung Sang-gun when touching the king is prohibited. Therefore, they want to see him punished. Yung Sang-gun loses his temper and tells all of them to piss off, but they put their heads on the ground and request him to reconsider and punish Jin Sung. Apparently, they haven't recovered from the emotional damage the drunk Jin Sung had caused when he roasted their asses. In his mind, Jin Sung has decided to kill all of them, starting with the inspector. Meanwhile, Jin Sung tells his teacher, Zhang Gun-li, that he knows of a way to deal with smallpox. Zhang Gun-li takes Jin Sung to the most ancient medicinal library, where he meets a young prodigy named Zhang Guim. He knows from his history books that she'll grow up to be quite successful. They find out there is only one book in the entire library, and it was written by Sun Jie's grandfather. They visit Sun Jie, who tries to get the wholesome Jin Sung some concubines, but the Chad immediately refuses. He reveals that his grandfather died 3 years ago, but his father has his books. Zhang Gun-li refuses to enter the house because Sun Jie's father is believed to be treacherous. So, Sun Jie, Jin Sung, and Zhang Guim enter to find a solution to the smallpox, since it is 300 years too early for the vaccine to even be discovered. Sun Jie's father welcomes the visitors and informs them that his father was an honorable man, but he hasn't been able to pass on his legacy by getting caught up in politics. Jin Sung and Zhang Guim are shocked to see the hefty collection of books and promise the old man to help him redeem his father's name by using his work to save the king's son. Time ticks by. Zhang Guim falls asleep, but Jin Sung doesn't give up. Book after book, he reads through all of them. until the sun rises. Zhang Guim is amazed to see Jin Sung's determination and is taken aback when she realizes that he has read all the books except for the one that was written in Sanskrit that only the monks can read. They borrow the book from Sun Jie's father, who asks them if there really is any way to prevent smallpox. Zhang Guim replies that since butchers and farmers don't catch smallpox, there has to be a way, and she knows this because her father is a butcher. Jin Sung arrives home and collapses on the floor from lack of sleep. The next day, he asks Yul to get the Sanskrit book translated by a monk. He leaves with Doksun to meet with the butchers. He runs into Zhang Guim's father and asks him about the cows that get infected with smallpox. He replies that they either sell them cheap or eat them when no one is willing to buy them. Zhen Sung realizes that this is the secret behind butchers being immune to smallpox. He searches the place to get his hands on a cow with smallpox and finds the same family he gave the watermelons to. The family is worried because someone duped them into buying a cow with smallpox, and they're not sure what to do with it. Zhen Sung pays them a lot of money for the cow, and when Doksun asks him why, he replies that this cow will save many lives in Joseon. He arrives home with the cow, and Yul hands him the translated book. Soon, Zhang Guim visits Zhong Sung and is enthralled by Yul's beauty. It's funny how Yul is jealous and suspicious of even a little girl and keeps popping her head into the window to keep an eye on the two. When she learns the truth behind why Jin Sung wanted the book translated, brought home a cow, and is now sitting with a little girl who is known to be a prodigy, Yul feels extremely embarrassed. Jin Sung reveals that he's planning to make the village understand the vaccine in their own superstitious language. He's going to present the vaccine as a god who is much more powerful than the ghosts who spread smallpox. They spend the entire night collecting pus from the cow's pimples and announce the next morning that they have found the cure. Obviously, everyone's reluctant, especially when they find out that the cure requires them to inject pus into their bodies. Seeing that, Jin Sung makes himself the first subject, and Zhang Guim injects the pus into his body. He announces that in a couple of days, a bear-shaped mark will appear on his body, which means he's been blessed. Yul demands that Jin Sung should inject the pus into her as well, and Zhang Guim can't help but cringe whenever the two of them get lovey-dovey. In the end, even Zhang Guim wants Jin Sung to inject the pus into her blood. Yun Sang-gun invites Jin Sung to the palace, so he gets ready to leave and decides to drop Zhang Guim at her home on the way. While leaving, Zhang Guim smirks at Yul, hinting that she's about to steal her man. It seems that her suspicion was spot on. Chibi Zhang Guim-chan has developed feelings for Jin Sung. Anyway, at the king's quarters, Yung Sang-gun is shocked to see a cut on Jin Sung's nose, but remembers that he himself had caused it. Seeing how thoughtful Jin Sung always is, Yung Sang-gun mentions that he should be the king instead of him. However, he cheers up after Jin Sung compliments him for having the ability and intellect to operate an entire state, something he admits he's not capable of. During the royal dinner, Yung Sang-gun asks Jin Sung not to come to the festival tomorrow, and not to ask him the reason, although Jin Sung is skeptical at first, but later agrees because he knows that the purging is supposed to take place next year, so there's no way something could happen at the festival. However, it seems that Jin Sung doesn't know about the butterfly effect, in which tiny changes in the timeline can change the entire plot. It seems like everything Jin Sung has been doing so far has only made matters worse. Jin Sung wants to protect the entire village from getting smallpox, so he decides to coax them into getting the pus injections. First victim is Doksun. Soon, the rumor spreads to the inspectors that Jin Sung has snapped and has been abusing his servants by stabbing them with needles without mercy. The rumor also says that he abuses his wife, that he stripped off her clothes and stabbed her with needles in front of the servants. The inspector visits the origin of the rumors, the laundry place. Apparently, the women there are so pissed that their soap savior, Doksun, has gotten ill because of the Grand Prince that they started these rumors. The general inspector is convinced that the rumors are true. He informs the king about it and demands that action must be taken against Jin Sung as soon as possible, and he won't leave without an answer. It seems like the poem Laundry is about to become a reality even sooner than previously expected. Yung Sang-gun decides that it's best to play along with Inspector Min Hui's rules for now, so he agrees to punish Jin Sung after the festival. He visits Song Jae's father one last last time before the festival and asks him to narrate the story of his mother again so he can get fired up before executing his revenge during the festival. It's said that after his mother was exiled due to her jealous behavior, Yung Sang-gun's father, whom Yung Sang-gun just refers to as the previous king, ordered that the queen should be killed with poison so she wouldn't return to claim the throne once their son, Yung Sang-gun, rises to power. All the courtiers supported divorce and execution with poison, especially Inspector Min Hui. After Inspector Li Sewa hesitated to give her poison, Inspector Min Hui and others forced him to. The last thing his mother ever asked for was permission to see her son. The story ends and Yung Sang-gun's face is soulless with bloodshot eyes. Nothing can stop him from what he's about to do tomorrow at the festival. The festival is dedicated to the elders of the society, and Yung Sang-gun looks like he's in a pretty good mood. One by one, he offers each of the inspectors drinks, until he meets Inspector Sewa, who was ordered to poison his mother. Although the latter is pretty drunk already, Yung Sang-gun still insists to drink more. Meanwhile, Jin Sung has been twisting and turning on the floor. He can't understand why he wasn't allowed at the festival. Cutting his train of thought, he's informed that a child is looking for him. This happens to be the same girl from the family he gave the watermelons to and bought the infected cow from. After panting and panicking, she reveals that her father has been unjustly taken away by the landlord and is about to be wrapped up and beaten up in a mat over the accusation that he wasn't working and was lazy. Jin Sung quickly heads over to the place to give this arrogant landlord a lesson, but decides to keep his identity a secret for now. Jin Sung uses every ancient slang he knows and directs them to the landlord without revealing that he's royalty. The landlord assumes he's just a random drunk teenager who's insane, so he treats the way he would treat anybody else. He punches the prince right across the face, probably the last thing he'll ever do. A wide smile appears on Jin Sung's face. This was what he wanted all along. Deok-sun reveals that he has no idea what the punishment for a culprit who punches royalty is, because no one's ever done it before. At hearing the word royalty, the landlord starts cracking up, claiming that this teenager is in fact insane. Jin Sung, ever so calmly, orders Deok-sun to bring back up and refuses to move from this place even if it means getting beaten up to death. Meanwhile, Yung Sang-gun invites Inspector Min Hui and Inspector Se-hwa to sit beside him. He offers both of them a special type of soju that is rare and expensive. Both of the inspectors let down their guard and enjoy a drink with the king. After getting a little drunk, Min Hui even apologizes for insisting on punishing Jin Sung. Yung Sang-gun gets close to Min Hui's ear and whispers that this is not the apology he was looking for. He wants him to apologize for what they did to his mother. This causes both of the inspectors to panic. Since Se-hwa was a bit too drunk, he trips and grabs onto the king, accidentally spilling the drink, and later tumbles down the stairs. This might just be the start of the end. Yung Sang-gun planned for all of this to happen. According to Min Hui's words a couple of days ago, anyone who touches the king deserves punishment. Now that Li Se-hwa has not just spilled the drink on him but also dared to grab onto his cloak, he's deserving of the same punishment that Min Hui wanted Jin Sung to have for hugging the king. However, all of the courtiers deny the fact that the two events are similar, which adds fuel to Yung Sang-gun's fire. He mentions that he knows what they all did to his mother, and therefore, even the slightest of their mistakes will not be forgiven. To make matters worse, the courtiers keep comparing him to his father, the man he absolutely despises. Yung Sang-gun announces that he'll punish Se-hwa, along with Min Hui, who couldn't come up with an appropriate punishment for Se-hwa. Meanwhile, Jin Sung is chilling out in a cellar and no one has yet arrived to bail him out to prove his identity. Zhang Guom comes up to patch his wounds, but it starts raining so she has to leave early. However, Zhang Guanli and Yul soon arrive in heavy rain to get Jin Sung back, and everyone is shocked to hear the mention of the Grand Prince being locked up in a cellar. An investigator is assigned the case of Li Se-hwa, while Yul and Zhang Guanli come to Jin Sung's rescue. The prince is then informed of whatever happened at the festival, and he remembers that even in the history, spilling of a drink was an excuse used by the king to start the purging. What he can't understand, however, is why everything is happening so fast. Zhang Guanli also mentions that a malicious poem has been floating around that precisely depicts the scene of Yung Sang-gun punishing the courtiers implicitly. Zhen Sung is amazed at how people of the ancient times take everything metaphorically and somehow manage to misinterpret his wholesome poem. He soon realizes the role he's playing in this timeline. Even against his own wishes, he just keeps triggering the purging to happen sooner and sooner. The findings of the investigator prove Li Sejua innocent because drinking is his weakness and he couldn't refuse the drink the king had offered. Yung Sang-gun obviously is furious by this response. The courtiers whisper among themselves that his anger towards Sejua is partly due to the fact that he's poisoned his mother. After realizing this, they decide that it's best to step aside for now. So they agree in front of the king that his desire to punish Sejua is valid. But Yung Sang-gun doesn't want it to stop there. He also wants to punish Min Hui. Before he could announce anything, though, a messenger delivers the information that Zhen Sung has been involved in an assault. At this news, there's an uproar inside the court, who already despises Zhen Sung with every fiber of their being. Even Yung Sang-gun finds it hard to defend Zhen Sung now. However, soon another messenger arrives and explains that Zhen Sung was the victim of the assault. This causes Yung Sang-gun to spring up on his feet and kick down the door in front of him to rush to meet his little brother. However, he soon gets the news that Zhen Sung is already in his quarters, so stops midway and takes a U-turn. When he meets Zhen Sung, he's relieved to see him, but also asks him a very dubious question. Yung Sang-gun asks Zhen Sung if he trusts him. Zhen Sung immediately and quick-wittedly responds that of course he trusts him, because they're family. When asked what a family means to him, Zhen Sung adds that a family is someone who holds you when you are in despair, so that you don't fall into the hole of depression. And they also hold you in times of happiness so that you don't fall into the trap of pride. After that, Zhen Sung removes the band-aid that was covering the scar given to him by Yung Sang-gun when the former tried to hug him. Yung Sang-gun starts to tear up after hearing such emotional words, and Zhen Sung rushes to hug him. The servants try to stop him, but decide not to. This shows that Yung Sang-gun wasn't the monster history painted him out to be, but it was the courtiers who made him that monster. Soon, the trial of the landlord who punched Zhen Sung takes place, and there's no way Yung Sang-gun is going to leave the attacker of his brother unscarred. To add a cherry on top, the landlord is a relative of Min Hui, Yung Sang-gun's sworn rival. Hearing this good news, his emotions erupt with astronomical ecstasy. He orders Min Hui to be arrested. It seems that everything Zhen Sung does or gets involved in only pushes Yung Sang-gun closer to insanity. Everyone who once took part in Yung Sang-gun's mother's execution is trembling with fear in their homes. Meanwhile, all of the villagers are becoming witnesses to the landlord Min Take's cruelty for the past 10 years. The part that is of interest to Yung Sang-gun is that Min Take used Inspector Min Hui protection to his advantage and spread chaos throughout the village. This had been going unnoticed for so long because of all the reports against him were discarded since he had a family member in the court. Yung Sang-gun also throws an administrator into the cellar for his negligence regarding the same matter. While Inspector Li Sejua, the administrator, and landlord Min Take sit in the jail, Min Hui is summoned before the king and is forced to kneel. Although he's initially calm and collected, he soon starts to lose his cool when the matter's narrated before him. Not only is his family member guilty of assaulting royalty, but also of spreading chaos throughout the land. For the first time, Yung Sang-gun feels like he has an upper hand against his cunning ex-inspector, Min Hui. Yung Sang-gun yells at the top of his lungs how the entire court was always busy and telling him to listen to them and everything will be all right. He questions them that why is it then that the villagers were suffering under the tyranny of Min Take? His most influential question that no one is able to respond to is that why the victim's daughter came running to the Grand Prince instead of the officials for justice. You could hear a pin drop after that, which means that Yung Sang-gun is now ready to fulfill his dream. He orders Min Hui to be tortured for not having a response to his questions. He's warned by his servants that this will go down in history and paint him in a negative light. But Yung Sang-gun claims that how the future generations see him won't affect him. He only cares about his people. The night ends, but Min Hui's punishment doesn't. As the sun rises, Yung Sang-gun peacefully eats his breakfast right in front of Min Hui, whose flesh is burning from the branding iron. Yung Sang-gun demands for it to be hotter, causing the courtiers to panic, but then it turns out that he was talking about the meat. Him and his dad jokes will be the death of the court one day. Eventually, Min Hui passes out from the pain and is locked up. Yung Sang-gun seems to be in a pretty good mood, especially now that he has the courtiers dancing on his fingertips. He keeps threatening them with the fact that they all deserve to be punished for their negligence, but is choosing to ignore it. On his way, he bumps into his wife. It seems they're meeting after a long time. She asks him if he's headed towards his concubine, Nok-su's place. When he reminds her not to poke her nose into his business, she mentions how his mother did the same with his father, and then asks him if her fate will be the same. She also reprimands him for punishing his courtiers because she believes that karma might come back for their kids. Yung Sang-gun reminds her that the entire nation are his children, and he isn't afraid of getting blood on his hands for the sake of justice. Someone give this man an Oscar for being the best Joseon king. Jin Sung is summoned at the king's quarters, where Yung Sang-gun is enjoying Nok-su's company. Yung Sang-gun has a hard time trying to ask Jin Sung why he abused his servants with a needle. So Nok-su bluntly asks the prince why he was experimenting perverted methods with his servants and wife. At this allegation, Jin Sung requests them to meet Zhang Guam, who explains that they have found a way of preventing smallpox. Yung Sang-gun's jaw drops to the floor. Zhang Guam shows that she and Jin Sung now have smallpox marks on their shoulders where the needle was injected. They had a small fever and then quickly recovered, and someone who gets smallpox once becomes immune to it for a lifetime. Zhang Guam also mentions that she used the infected prince's pillow and slept on it for some days and hasn't been infected, which is proof of her immunity. Yang Sung-gun is excited to announce this discovery to the officials and the state. To add to Yung Sang-gun's good mood, a servant comes rushing into the quarters to inform the king that his son has been cured. It's a blessing to see Yung Sang-gun smiling for the first time in a way that does not make him look like Charles Manson. The man is genuinely happy. He grants Jin Sung and Zhang Guam a wish. Suddenly, Zhang Guam gets a flashback of all the times she was bullied for being a butcher's daughter. No one in the medical school was willing to even be beside her because she smelled like raw meat. It was only Jin Sung who acknowledged her troubles and reminded her that she's going to be famous worldwide for her skills in medicine. This reignited her passion to save lives. Her wish to King is to assign more doctors for the state and send them to other districts so they can gain more knowledge. Yung Sang-gun agrees to grant her this wholesome wish and demands that she should be his personal doctor. Next turn is for Jin Sung's wish, and we all know what he wants. The reason why he is here, to stop the purging. With a heavy heart and a stuttering tongue, Jin Sung wishes for Yung Sang-gun to forgive all of the courtiers. The latter asks the prince to reconsider his wish, but Jin Sung sticks to it. Jin Sung leaves his quarter to meet his son, who is already in the arms of his mother. The father and son run to hug each other, causing Yung Sang-gun's emotions to overflow. Nok-su realizes this is not her place to be, so she decides to step aside. Later that night, Yung Sang-gun meets with Sung Jae's father, who also helped in discovering the vaccine. Yung Sang-gun questions him if it's wise to grant Jin Sung his wish. Apparently, a few days later, Yung Sang-gun pardons the courtiers' lives and only exiles them. This means that Jin Sung didn't just stop the purging from happening, but he also got his brother rid of the leeches that were sucking his blood, aka the courtiers. Now, Jin Sung just hopes that Yung Sang-gun will continue to be a great king so that he can stay a prince and be beside his wife. Min Taek's lands have been gifted to Jin Sung, who has reduced the rate that the farmers have to pay from 60% to 30%. Apparently, the king has turned a man of high honor into a slave as a punishment for his sins. Jin Sung gifts this slave to the man who was beaten up by Min Taek recently, and the slave is none other than Min Taek himself. How the tables have turned. New doctors have been assigned to Joseon, who wish to acquire Jin Sung's help in writing an article regarding smallpox. Suddenly, Jin Sung realizes the main cause for the spread of the smallpox. These people don't know about soap. He calls a meeting of all the doctors and nurses and tries to help them understand the concept of germs in a language that's easy for them. After everyone believes that germs in fact do exist, they start getting terrified from the fact that these creatures are all over their hands. That's when Jin Sung introduces his proud discovery of soap. Everyone is given soap, and Doksun is ordered to make even more to supply the entire kingdom of Joseon. Later, Jin Sung holds a feast where yet another fried chicken dish is introduced that everyone enjoys. Jang Gun is happy to see everyone, regardless of their rank and class, laughing together. Jin Sung also visits the king's quarters to gift him the dish and requests for oil that is needed for the production of soap. Yang Sung Gun recommends him to start promoting pig farms among the villagers to obtain oil from pig fat. Jin Sung loves the idea and starts working on it. Soon, restaurants spring up inside Joseon that offer fried chicken. Everyone has started using soap, which is now being produced on a mass scale. So we have Jin Sung's 4 achievements so far: smallpox vaccine, hygiene through soap, fried chicken, and stopping the purging. All of this gave an immense boost to Joseon's population, and it became one of Asia's superpowers. Chicken farms are progressing, and a soap industry is under construction. Meanwhile, Jin Sung loves mingling with the common people and observing their lives. Some of the citizens have even started to come up with new creative dishes using fried chicken, and Jin Sung couldn't be more proud. One day, a zombie-like person stumbles into Jin Sung. Apparently, he was attracted towards the smell of fried chicken. At first, Jin Sung panics, but suddenly remembers the heroic image that people of Joseon have of him, and he gains composure. He soon realizes that the man is just a beggar whose story is quite remarkable. The beggar reveals that he used to be a full silver alchemist who can turn scrap metal into silver. A few years back, he showed his skills to the king, who was impressed and gave him platinum bars. But the old farts of the court called him a trickster and had him thrown away. His only wish was to create a silver mine of his own, so he decided to use up his own money. But this was of no use, and soon he became broke to the point where he had to start begging. Other beggars who were territory obsessed beat him up for entering their territory, and that's how his condition became so awful. A light bulb lights up in Einstein's, aka Jin Sung's, conscience once again. He meets up with Yung Sang-gun, who is practicing archery, and asks him if he remembers a guy who goes by the name of Kim Gambul. After giving it some thought, Yung Sang-gun does remember the man who made silver out of scrap metal. Jin Sung reveals that this man is now living with him. Yung Sang-gun takes it as a joke, but realizes that the matter is actually serious when Jin Sung asks him if he can make a silver mine. Yung Sang-gun reveals that the reason why the courtiers refused to allow the making of silver mines was because they were afraid that a rich nation could go corrupt. Jin Sung calls that absolute crap and asks Yung Sang-gun if he's changed his mind now since the courtiers have been dealt with. According to the king, it's a good idea that he'll think about later. Jin Sung's home is getting new equipment every day thanks to Kim Gambul. Soon, the latter leaves and thanks Jin Sung for letting him stay over and asking the king to allow the construction of the silver mine. Meanwhile, at the king's quarters, Nok-su is playing around with the Yung Sang-gun and keeps nagging at him for being a messy eater. Yung Sang-gun sarcastically calls her mother, but obviously our dude has deep-rooted mommy issues. Nok-su even asks the king to let her take care of the silver mines, and later it's revealed that her brother-in-law was granted control of the mines. Is Nok-su good for Yung Sang-gun, or is she just manipulating him? It seems that Yung Sang-gun's peace is short-lived, especially due to the fact that some barbarians seem to have attacked the northern border. Jin Sung is visiting a northern city to spread the cure for smallpox and his newly invented soaps. The city is known for having concubines, so our pimp, Sun Jae, disappears without any information. Jang Guam and Jin Sung decide to explore the place they'll be staying in. Suddenly, a heavily injured man crawls up their wall from the outside and falls into their garden. The man begs the two to not reveal his location because he's on the run from some malicious people. Soon, someone starts banging on Jin Sung's door, and it's a group of people who are looking for an injured man, who they claim ran away from battle. Jin Sung tells them that he's a grand prince and there's nothing to look for in his place. The man leaves after hearing this, but he's suspecting the prince because he's noticed bloodstains on his sleeves. Jin Sung rushes to help the man, but it seems like his feet are already dangling in the grave, so Jin Sung asks Jang Guum to take him to a nearby hospital. Before leaving, the man informs them he's being chased by Joseon's soldiers, which shocks Jin Sung. While the man is being taken care of in the hospital, Jin Sung and Jang Gon discuss that something smells very fishy about this. If this man ran away from battle, he shouldn't have this many wounds all over his body. This means he was fighting all the way from the borders when he arrived here. Meanwhile, Joseon's soldiers command everyone nearby a hospital to be checked for this deserter. Jin Sung realizes their plan, so he visits the man first to hear the story. The man reveals that he is a mercenary who's in the army instead of his master, which is basically illegal, but he was doing this for money. Suddenly, the nearby state attacked and many of the soldiers under the command of Kim Un-yol deserted the battlefield, including the ones who are chasing him now. Those left behind were only a handful who tried their best to protect the people inside the walls. Fortunately, they succeeded in causing the enemy to retreat, but before these 12 people could celebrate any victory, arrows were shot at them and 11 of them bled to death. The attackers were none other than the Joseon army's deserters who wanted the fame and glory of the victory for themselves. The man tried his best to run for his life, and now the real deserters are going around framing him for being a deserter. Jin Sung decides that this matter must be in the knowledge of the king before any false reports reach him. And yes, all this time Sun Jae was just lousily hanging around with concubines. However, when he returns to the prince's place drunk, the ground slips away from beneath his feet when he sees that the entire house is on fire. Apparently, Captain Kim Un-yol ordered someone to secretly light up the prince's house because he assumed that the injured man was there. So basically, he decided to kill the prince along with him just to cover up his sins. Sun Jae mourns Jin Sung's death and blames himself for being careless. Meanwhile, Jin Sung and his squad are safely traveling towards Yongsan-gun and are a little guilty for not taking Sun Jae along, but it's not like they had enough time. Jin Sung enters the king's quarters and is appalled to hear that the false report has already reached Yongsan-gun. Therefore, he quickly narrates the real side of the story, which causes Yongsan-gun's blood to boil. He summons Captain Kim Un-yol with a promise to reward him. With a puffed-up chest, Kim Un-yol enters the palace expecting a lavish reward. Yongsan-gun compliments his achievements in front of the courtiers. When Kim Un-yol's ego inflates to the point of exploding, Yongsan-gun unexpectedly punches him in his gut. After that, the captain is rolled up in a mat and the king himself gives him the honor of getting beaten up by royal hands. Yongsan-gun, without taking a break, consistently beats up Kim Un-yol until blood starts flowing out with each thud. The only reason he's getting this much punishment is for deserting a battle and trying to frame a brave soldier. He then sits down to catch a breath and hands over the stick to his courtiers, who probably used to think that they are too holy to get blood on their hands. Soon, Yongsan-gun is told that Sun Jae, with swollen eyes, huge eye bags, messed up hair, is waiting to be punished. Poor guy still thinks that the prince is dead. Seeing Jin Sung standing in front, breathes new life into him, and he promises to never drink again. Jin Sung spends the rest of his day finding ingredients for seaweed stew that he plans to make for his wife's birthday party tomorrow, who later admits that she's the luckiest woman in the entire Joseon, whose husband treats her so lovingly. The women in the laundry place, aka the origin place of every rumor, are talking about how Prince Jin Sung made his wife oysters and seaweed stew. While some are in awe of the adorable couple, the others are just bitterly jealous because they either don't have husbands or have husbands who yell at them all the time. To pour salt on their wounds, Grand Prince's disciple, who probably has mastered flirting by now, Dok-sun, arrives and helps his lover in taking the laundry to her place. Apparently, he's learned a lot of pickup lines now. The enraged women start doing laundry even more aggressively now. A servant arrived to deliver the queen's important message. She wants oysters and seaweed stew. Sun Jae deduces that this is probably because of the rumor that Jin Sung made Yul this dish for her birthday, and now every wife in Joseon is making their husbands cook seaweed stew for them, and King Yongsan-gun is now another victim. Yongsan-gun immediately enters the royal kitchen and kicks out every servant except for one, and asks asks him to teach the art of making oysters and seaweed stew. Yung Sang-gun changes into a chef's outfit and makes a delicious finger-licking dish. After that, he casually threatens to kill the royal chef if a word of what has just happened gets out. However, it seems that one of the servants secretly witnessed this new side of the king, which is probably thanks to Zhenzong. Nok-su is informed by her sister that King was preparing seaweed stew, and she starts feeling proud of herself for finally having Yung Sang-gun in her control. Meanwhile, Yung Sang-gun presents the dish to his wife, who starts crying before she can even eat it. She says that she'd rather save it all than waste it by eating it. Yung Sang-gun starts laughing out of embarrassment, and the royal servants feel relieved that the couple has finally started getting lovey-dovey with each other. When Nok-su hears that the king went through all those efforts to impress his wife, she lashes out, and her anger is uncontrollable. She can't believe that after all of her struggles, the king still hasn't gotten over the queen. She mentions that even she acquired Sun-jae, the pimp's help, to introduce the to many women so that he won't fall for one woman. The biggest weapon of all is Nok-su's appearance. Her looks resemble that of Yung Sang-gun's mother. She used it to keep him glued to herself. However, this recent act of affection towards the queen has set Nok-su's heart on fire. Later on, Zhenzong hears about the event from Yung Sang-gun and keeps teasing him about it. The biggest relief for the prince is that it is now confirmed that he has prevented the purging, given the king's change of heart and mind. However, it might just be too early to relax. Yung Sang-gun drops a bomb on Zhenzong that he's planning on attacking Zhirkin, the country that attacked the borders. Poor Zhenzong thought the life would finally be bloodless, free of screams and full of love and peace. No, sit your ass down, because your brother is about to declare a damn war. Even though courtiers are against this decision, Yung Sang-gun believes that the country must be punished for harming Joseon's people, whom he considers as his children. The only problem is funding. Zhenzong uses whatever knowledge remains inside his pea-sized yet inventive brain about the art of war, probably the only book he ever read. He tells Yung Sang-gun with a cunning smile that they will obtain the finances from the rich people. Yung Sang-gun doesn't understand how getting the rich to pay makes sense. Zhenzong reveals that he learned about something called mercenaries that even Yung Sang-gun didn't know existed. Rich people who pay them to join the army instead of them, so they should be able to pay for the war. It's not like they have the brawn or brains needed for battle anyway. Their own personality trait is money, so it should be fine to use it. Yung Sang-gun agrees, but the problem is convincing the rich families. Zhenzong volunteers to donate 10,000 coins to give the families a head start. Seeing Zhenzong's enthusiasm, Yung Sang-gun invites him to a meeting with the courtiers. As expected, the entire court is against the decision of war and making the rich pay. They use an excuse that this can start a revolt. Hearing the word revolt causes Yung Sang-gun to snap, and he looks like he's about to choose violence. Suddenly, Zhenzong steps up and volunteers to join the battle physically if that's what it takes to make the shameless courtiers agree to the decision. No one has ever seen the Grand Prince this fired up before. At home, Zhenzong gets quite an earful from Zhang Gon for getting involved in the country's affairs. He reminds them that at this moment, Zhenzong is a perfect symbol of rebellion because everyone looks up to him. And if he gets caught up in a rebellion, the first person that people will point fingers to will be none other than the teacher. The worst part is that Yul overhears this conversation and runs away crying. All of a sudden, Zhenzong becomes a Hishira with his sword emitting blue lightning and enemy soldiers getting slashed left and right. Now, this is either his dream or imagination, but he's enjoying his time being some anime protagonist. Turns out this is all his imagination, and in reality, he's fighting a scarecrow while Doksun is trying hard not to sleep while watching him dancing around like a maniac. Yuk-su, the ex-mercenary, arrives on the scene and recommends Zhenzong to not at least stand at the front line because if he gets captured, it will be a huge blow to the army's morale. Zhenzong knows that this is the year in history in which Yung Sang-gun commits the purging, so everything he's doing is to calm the anger of his brother. Yuk-su suddenly remembers equipment known as the Divine Weapon that's able to break down the enemy's strengths by shooting numerous fires at once. Yet again, a light bulb lights up in Jin Sung's conscience, and it seems that another discovery might very well be on its way. Jin Sung's archery and swordsmanship skills keep improving each day. Yong Sang-gun mentions that he's really worried about him entering the battlefield, so Jin Sung requests that to ensure his survival, he needs funds to make a weapon. Yong Sang-gun tells him that there aren't even any funds for the war, let alone for weapons. Even Jin Sung volunteering didn't prompt the richest to sacrifice their belongings. Surprisingly, Jin Sung is ecstatic to hear this news. Although he's been acting tough, he had been wishing that somehow the war would be cancelled. He goes home to tell this news to his depressed wife, and then they both celebrate with fried chicken. Maybe they were too quick to celebrate. Seeing Jin Sung's resolve, Zhang Gon holds a meeting of scholars to sign petitions to make the war mandatory. This way, it would be easier to raise funds. Apparently, while being attacked from the north, Joseon is also being attacked from the south by pirates. If matters aren't settled now, Zhang Gon believes that the state, after meeting with courtiers, Yong Sang-gun is informed that the task of collecting the funds has failed miserably because the people of Joseon are not in favor of war. That's when a messenger arrives, holding a scroll containing thousands of signatures from thousands of scholars who have voted in favor of a war after Zhang Gon insisted. With this, the people have no choice but to join the war. The court is in shock, especially at the mention of Zhang Gon, whom they sent as a spy for Jin Sung, but apparently has developed a strong bond with him. Yong Sang-gun comments for such a significant contribution, he'll bring Zhang Gon's father back from exile. He also makes it mandatory for the old farts in the court to fight a war at the front lines. Although this is good for the country, Jin Sung's dreams have been crushed into a million pieces. A man who was getting rejected from job interviews consecutively now has to fight a war as a battalion leader because everyone now looks upon his social sense of justice. Yong Sang-gun summons Jin Sung and tells him the good news. To Jin Sung, it was more like a death sentence. Yong Sang-gun reveals that even young rich men are passionate to fight war, ever since Jin Sung set the example for them. The only thing Jin Sung is worried about is how he will disclose this information to his wife. Fortunately, Jin Sung's father-in-law has already taken care of the matter by visiting Yul and making her understand that the war is an honor for a man and his generations to come. Nok-su is busy combing her hair and is afraid that if she's late, the head slave will beat her. It seems like this is a flashback story of how Nok-su achieved the position she currently has. As she had expected, the head slave smacked her in the face, but it appears Nok-su had gotten used to it. This was the time when Jin Sung's uncle, Jian, who pretended to be insane, was around, but Nok-su and her best friend, Doik, knew that something suspicious was going on, because how come an insane man could be so good at playing musical instruments? One day, she found out that courtier Sun Jae, the man responsible for finding concubines for the king, is meeting with the Jaen prince to enjoy music. She pretended to lose her way and stumbled into them while casually singing. The second that Sun Jae laid his eyes on her, he realized her potential and invited her to sing in front of the king the next day. Apparently, Nok-su kept stolen makeup at her place and was excited for her meeting with the king. The head slave found out that something had been stolen from the dresser. Doik didn't want her friend's plans to meet with the king to get ruined, so she took the blame for herself and got severely beaten for it. Nok-su promised Doik that she will fool the king and get both of them out of this hell one day. Fast forward to the future, Nok-su calmly sits in the quarters granted to her by the king, and Doik is sitting in front of her, but is rather uncomfortable. Nok-su commands Doik to hide the pot she's giving under the queen's palace. The pot contains severed heads of insects and snakes along with the queen's name written on it. This witch is doing black magic. Meanwhile, Jin Sung, depressed because war is coming, enters the weapon department and notices the lack of short-range and light-range weapons. The spirit of Newton takes over him, and he talks to the head engineer about the possibility of creating rifles and flying bombs. Bro just keeps making mass genocide for Yong Sang-gun easier and easier. He might as well just cause World War I. Jin Sung is visited by two bright students from a renowned educational institute who ask him political questions for the sake of their studies. Initially, Jin Sung hesitates to answer because Zhang Gun told him that this can be considered an act of treason for the prince. But the questions aren't really that difficult for him to answer. They ask him what kind of a country they want Joseon to be. He simply replies that he wishes this to be a place for equality and justice where everyone gets the right to study and get a fulfilling job. Basically, he wants the class system to be eliminated and is sure that if he talks to Yung Sang-gun, this will be achieved. Hearing such an influential response that no one could have even thought of at the time because both the students' heads start spinning and they accuse themselves. Later, Jin Sung finds out that both of them dropped out of their school on their own and have decided to fight the war under Jin Song's wing because they wish to see his version of Joseon soon. The rifles have been invented thanks to Jin Sung, and the only hurdle in making flying bombs is the lack of saltpeter, which can be found under the ground near an old infrastructure. Jin Sung commands the entire battalion under him to start searching for saltpeter. Even the Grand Prince himself starts digging random places and sometimes even in front of public bathrooms. Meanwhile, Nok-su threatens her childhood friend, Doik, that she will kill her son if the word of her placing a curse on the queen ever gets out. Yul, concerned that her husband might have gone insane, tells him that Queen may have summoned him. The queen thanks him for inventing seaweed stew because it confirmed her husband's love for her. She also heavily rewards him for curing her son. While leaving, Jin Sung notices saltpeter under the palace walls, so disregarding the fact that he is watched by millions of people, he starts digging. This causes Doik to tremble in fear. Instead of saltpeter, Jin Sung finds a pot and screams, "Fill the palace," when it's opened. Yung Sang-gun is immediately informed that someone has placed a curse on the palace. When investigated further, an expert informs them that someone tried to harm the queen. When Yung Sang-gun announces that he'll torture everyone who entered the palace, Jin Sung calms him down by saying that he'll find out the culprit using fingerprints. The scientists of the time are amazed at yet another groundbreaking discovery. When Nok-su is informed about the matter, she starts panicking and asks her sister to take the entire blame for it because she gave the idea in the first place. Jin Sung comes to visit Nok-su to take her fingerprints, but she refuses and asks him to send the king. On his way, Jin Sung meets Doik, who narrates the entire matter and turns herself in. When Yung Sang-gun hears it, he finds it impossible to believe that Nok-su could be behind this. Jin Sung tells him the only way to confirm this is by taking her fingerprints, which she refuses to give. Yung Sang-gun, engulfed in rage, leaves and tells Jin Sung that he's going out for a drink. While Nok-su and her sister are planning about putting the entire matter on Doik's shoulders, Yung Sang-gun enters the room. However, he's surprisingly calm and asks her to have a drink with him. In the middle of a random conversation, he casually asks her why she had to go so far to take his wife's place. She denies the accusations and claims to be just a motherly figure for him. Hearing that, Yung Sang-gun leaves. Jin Sung is worried about the king's impulsive actions, so he waits outside Nok-su's house. Yung Sang-gun comes out, low-key sad, and hands over the bottle of wine that Nok-su had touched. Apparently, Yung Sang-gun pulled 3,000 IQ and obtained Nok-su's fingerprints without her even knowing it. Nok-su, her sister, her brother-in-law, and Doik are sentenced to death. Later, even more crimes of Nok-su are uncovered, which mostly involved her abusing her power. Just when Nok-su's head is about to get chopped off, Yung Sang-gun stops the execution, perhaps because she reminded him of his mother. The queen begs the king to let Doik go because she was being blackmailed with her son's life. Jin Sung is given yet another reward of solving a case with the help of fingerprints, and now life has become easier for the police department. When Nok-su is being exiled, she looks back at Sun-jae, who is sad, probably over the potential wasted. Soon, the people start pelting her with stones, and she starts laughing like a maniac after promising to take revenge on all of them. Days pass by, and Buddha's birthday arrives. On this occasion, everyone is supposed to make colorful lanterns. The Grand Queen In-su, the grandmother of the king and the prince, compliments Yul for making a beautiful lantern and tells her to make beautiful babies quickly so she can hold them in her hands before dying. Meanwhile, Jin Sung at the back is playing around with paper planes. The queen scolds him and tells him to make a lantern as soon as possible. The entire city is filled with colorful lanterns hanging above. Everyone gathers together, including Jin Sung's new self-claimed students and Janguum. The Grand Queen arrives and Janguum comments that she looks exhausted and apparently nothing can save her now. The Grand Queen asks Jin Sung to show his lantern. She's rather disappointed at his creativity. But to everyone's surprise, Jin Sung's lantern can fly. The Grand Queen watches as the lantern slowly approaches the moon. The scene reminds her of her father and her son. She gets emotional and asks Jin Sung to fly such a lantern the day she dies. Her words pierce through Jin Sung's heart because apparently his mother in his previous life died and said something very similar to him. While wiping away his tears, Jin Sung promises to fill the entire sky with lanterns on the day she dies, so she can easily find her way to heaven. Who is cutting onions here, goddammit? After exiling Nok-su, Yong Sang-gun has been acting strange. He doesn't distract himself in any sort of entertainment and is only focused on matters of the state. Even when Jin Sung arrives, Yong Sang-gun has an apathetic expression on his face and tells the latter that he's busy. Concerned, Jin Sung decides to take Yong Sang-gun's mind off whatever has been bothering him. As a result, Joseon's Tony Stark, Grand Prince Jin Seon, decides to introduce yet another invention, the hot air balloon. His newly claimed students state that although they are doubtful of its function, they believe in his intelligence, considering all of his previous marvelous inventions. Jun Sung is a little offended that his list of marvelous inventions did not include fried chicken. Anyway, he meets up with the head of the weapons department, Gap-dong, to start working on the plan. A couple of days pass by and the king is invited past midnight to an open field by Jun Sung. Yong Sang-gun's mind is blown by the gigantic balloon in front of him, and the depression inside of him evaporates away when he sees his little brother fly into the air. When Jun Sung tells him he can join him too, Yong Sang-gun starts jumping and running like an excited 5-year-old who's just been offered a lollipop. Everyone is happy to see the old king back. Word gets out that this king is about to ascend to the skies. Everyone finds it hard to believe and crowds gather to witness the miraculous event. They start yelling "Long live" as soon as the hot air balloon lifts up. Luckily, the sun rises at the same time and Yong Sang-gun witnesses a beautiful and appealing sight that lights up his mood thanks to his little brother. Unfortunately, on their way back to the quarters, he's informed that Nok-su has died and the boat she was getting exiled in capsized. Although initially Yong Sang-gun's heart stops, then he shrugs it off, saying she deserved it. However, it's later shown that Nok-su is in fact still alive, and she's been freed by a mysterious person whose face has not been revealed. It appears that 3 officials from the administration have decided to opt for treason, and they're the ones who saved Nok-su. She reveals that her purpose of living is revenge from now on. Meanwhile, the king is being shown skills like archery and army tactics before they leave for battle. Nok-su observes the entire event in disguise. The whole city comes to emotionally bid farewell to Jin Sung, while Yong Sang-gun and Sung Jae stay back to look after the people. The king gives a rhetorical speech to the army, emphasizing there better be no deserters. The march begins and one of the generals keeps suspiciously staring at Jin Sung. When they reach their destination and stop to strategize, the same general tries secretly to stab Jin Sung without him knowing. However, luckily, commotion erupts and a little girl is caught who somehow had camouflaged herself among 6-foot men. The genius is none other than Jang Guan. It's not her infatuation with Jin Sung that caused her to take such a dangerous step, but her obsession with becoming a good doctor. Although her wish to help heal the army is commendable, Jin Sung instantly sends her back with one of his students, Gyung Doik. The traitors back home have planned a rebellion because the country is the most vulnerable during battle. They plan on making Prince Jian the king after killing Yong Sang-gun and Jin Sung. The general who was in charge of assassinating the prince decides that the mission is impossible, however, to ignite the rebellion. His wife can be abducted instead. Jin Sung writes a letter to the king explaining that the front line has crossed the enemy's borders and has the upper hand. He also writes a letter to his wife, but unfortunately, both letters are stolen from the messenger before they can reach their destination. Jang Guam and Gyung Doik arrive home, but the former notices a man she saw in the army. He shouldn't be here unless he had deserted the battlefield. They follow him and find the truth about Nok-su and other rebels, and their plan to kidnap the princess. The kids try to run away with this information and almost get caught. Meanwhile, Jin Sung finds out that the messenger has been killed and frontline and backline generals have gone missing. Zheng Sung realizes that this is an act of treason and that a rebellion is about to happen. Even though he prevented the purging, a coup d'etat is in full swing. Meanwhile, the rebels have gathered outside the king's palace, criticizing Zheng Sung's new evil intentions, ready to irrationally take Yong Sang-gun's head. The latter is busy dreaming about Nok-su, who looks like she came straight out of The Conjuring 3. He wakes up and realizes that no one is responding to his calls. Soon, the head servant rushes in to inform him of the rebellion. The traitors try to capture the princess, but she is timely rescued by Jang-gun, who takes her to her father, who had probably been hitting the gym on this day. Since the front line had already crossed the borders, they couldn't be called back. Zheng Sung decides that he can't stay here. He leaves someone else in command, takes the horses, and leaves, while the faces of his wife and brother flash before his eyes. Rebels have entered the palace and have decapitated the head servants. To their surprise, the king has already escaped. Zheng Sung stops at the spectating camp and orders the head to send reinforcements for him as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the leaders of the rebellion try to convince, more like blackmail, the Grand Queen into giving an official order to make Zhane the new king. But she's Yong Sang-gun's grandmother after all, double stubborn. After the negotiations with the queen fail, the rebels try to take the matter into their own hands, strategizing to find the king. But where is he? In search of Yong Sang-gun, they investigate Sun Jae's house, who is busy indulging himself in alcohol and women. Didn't this guy give up both? It actually looks like he has. One of the women dressed lavishly happens to have a beard, and she happens to be Yong Sang-gun, who looks really pissed. The dress really suits him. Unfortunately, he's been caught, and Sun Jae and Yong Sang-gun are back-to-back, ready to take down the entire rebellion. Nok-su tries her best to get Prince Jane to accept that he's the new king, and the latter eventually drops his act of being insane. Yong Sang-gun and Sun Jae struggle while bleeding profusely from the arms, but soon help arrives from above. Literally, a hot air balloon is here. Gyeong-deok and Gap-dong throw a rope ladder from above, and Yong Sang-gun successfully climbs it. He calls for Sun Jae to hold his hand, but the latter has decided to be the hero and save the day. After getting attacked from every side, Sun Jae dies on the spot, and all the concubines run toward him while he thinks about his good days drinking with the king. It's time to go cry in a corner. Meanwhile, the rebels' worst-case scenario has manifested when Zheng Sung arrives at the main gate. The enemy tries to shoot down Yong Sang-gun's hot air balloon, but Weapon Chief Gap-dong had already brought a rifle with him. Zheng Sung demands the gates to be opened, or else he'll threaten to launch flying bombs, but the gatekeeper already knows he's bluffing, because there's no way he brought weapons for war. When all of these tactics fail and Zheng Sung is about to give up, he sees his brother up in the sky, in the balloon, and the entire tide of the battle turns. Yong Sang-gun has the time of his life by dropping flying bombs. He can finally let loose the psychopath within in a legal way. The rebels did not expect that the weapon chief had kept in store more weapons. Basically, all of Zheng Sung's inventions are about to save his life. Inside the walls, Zhang Gonli has convinced the citizens to fight alongside Yong Sang-gun. It's surprising because Zhang Gun has always been against the kingship of Yong Sang-gun. It was Zheng Sung who was able to change his heart to the level that he is ready to lay down his life for the man who exiled his father. Meanwhile, outside the walls, Zheng Sung has taken command of the military. He doesn't look like the unemployed guy from his previous life. Rather, he looks like a fearless strategist who was born to win a war. Both sides are pushing relentlessly. However, when a new force wearing red headbands joins Yong Sang-gun's forces, the rebels' morale is crushed. To add fuel to the fire inside the minds of the treacherous courtiers, this red force is being led by Zhang Gon, the person they sent as their spy. The real battle starts at the end of which the head of the rebels and Yong Sang-gun stand face to face. The main priority for the rebels is to take Yong Sang-gun's head. After a tough battle, Li Zhanggon arrives on a horse to cleverly take the king away, while a range of weapons is shot at the enemies. That's not the only help Yong Sang-gun is getting. Soon, the women from the laundromat arrive at the scene with their sticks and logs. It's as if Zheng Sung's fan following has been preparing for this moment. The rebel forces realize that they lost the battle the second the people of Joseon joined the king's side. more and more people start leaving their homes and comfort behind to protect the king. Eventually, the leader of the enemy dies, and with it, the rebellion. Joseon's army bows before the king, causing him to tear up and bow back. This was the tyrant they wanted to overthrow. After that, they march towards the palace where Prince Jane and Noksu are hiding. Yong Sang-gun kicks the doors open, and Jane loses his sanity once again. After overpowering the treacherous people inside the palace, Yong Sang-gun peacefully sits on the throne again. But his peace is short-lived when Jang Noksu emerges from behind his throne and stabs him in the back until his consciousness fades away. Yong Sang-gun slowly regains his senses. Thanks, God. The only problem is that he's wearing a suit, has short hair, and is currently inside a modern-day building. He panics and starts trembling until he finally sees a familiar face. Jin Sung calmly enters the room and tells Yong Sang-gun to get ready for the press. Apparently, Yong Sang-gun is a rookie actor in this life, and Jin Sung is Hyun-ho Lee, the manager, whom we met at the start of the story. Yong Sang-gun has recently filmed a movie about a tyrant ruler, and he slowly realizes that the movie everyone is talking about is based on his previous life. He has a panic attack when some of the reporters start referring to the ruler as cruel and the rebellion as justified. Once again, he passes out. Fortunately, when he wakes up, he's in Joseon again. He's told that all of the rebels, including Noksu, have been captured. The best part of the story happens when Noksu and the rebels get dismembered. Finally, inner peace. The king falls into the old routine of keeping himself busy with state affairs, so Jin Sung decides to casually invent a couple of more things: jajangmyeon noodles and pool billiards. To his surprise, Yong Sang-gun is actually a pro at pool, because to him the game is just like ruling a kingdom. After the game, Yong Sang-gun drops a bomb on Jin Sung. He wants Jin Sung's worst nightmare to happen. He has decided to abdicate the kingship and crown his little brother as king. Everything that Jin Sung did was to prevent this very thing from happening, and it's staring him right in the face again. Apparently, Yong Sang-gun believes that if he stays the king, he will only be remembered as a tyrant. To change history, he's decided to work from behind the scenes, away from the spotlight. Jin Sung does the most logical thing he can think of. He takes his wife and runs away. Screw kingship, man. The dude just wants a peaceful life with his wife. However, he soon realizes that she's pregnant and he's going to be a father. The king also finds out about him running away and summons him back. Jin Sung admits defeat and realizes there's no other option than to just become the king. So everything happens according to history. Coup d'etat happens, Yong Sang-gun quits the throne, and Jin Sung becomes the king. The difference is that the coup d'etat fails. The people of Joseon love Yong Sang-gun, and Jin Sung and Yeol can live together. Long live the king. Hyun-ho Lee wakes up in the modern world, just when his life in Joseon had gotten good. He curses his existence and starts looking for a job again. While acting as an extra in a film based on history, Hyun-ho Lee bumps into Yong Sang-gun and starts crying in relief. Apparently, both remember each other from their past lives. Jin Sung explains the entire situation to Yong Sang-gun, especially the fact that now he has to work to feed himself. The ex-kings of a dynasty get the roles of servants in a movie. Soon, Hyun-ho Lee decides to become Yong Sang-gun's manager and gets him a role of a king in a movie that is actually based on his previous life, titled I Shall Live as a Prince. Although this calls for a celebration, they both realize that history has been twisted by modern-day scholars. Soon, Hyun-ho Lee starts missing Yeol and is told that the management is finding it hard to recruit an actress to play her role. One day, a girl auditions and is immediately selected. Hyun-ho Lee rushes to meet her and is surprised to see that she is none other than his own Yeol. They both recognize each other, start crying, and run to embrace one another. Ah, soulmates for a lifetime. If you love this manga, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us an opinion in the comments section.